This is Focus on Africa. I'm Lukwesa Birak. Our top stories. How coronavirus is exposing a digital divide. The young people across the continent losing out on their education because they have no internet access.
For now, even though they bring for me an examination paper, I think I will just perform poorly.
After Tuesday's anti-government protests, Cameroon's main opposition leader tells the BBC soldiers are preventing him from leaving his home. We have the latest from Yaoundé. Breaking ground, breaking barriers. Zimbabwe's all-female miners smashing the stereotypes in a traditionally male world. Also in the programme, solving the root of the problem. The barbers weaving their magic on male hair loss after spotting a gap in the market. Hello and welcome to Focus on Africa, coming to you from BBC World News. Now, millions of school children in Africa and in fact around the world have been hit by something of a double whammy during this pandemic. Events haven't just impacted on their education. The coronavirus has brought into sharp focus life's inequalities and compounded them. UNESCO describes a growing digital and learning gap between rich and poor. In some cases, it's having devastating consequences on other parts of children's lives. For many, school is actually the only access to a regular meal. And for girls, well, their future outlook is even more stark, with many being forced into child marriages to alleviate family poverty. The BBC's Sylvia Chebet travelled to northern Kenya to discover what school closures there mean to the Turkana children.
Like everywhere else, Nangerem village in Turkana County has children of school-going age. But for the children in this village, the onset of COVID-19 ended access to an extra meal daily and formal learning. Jacqueline Anamekiru is in her final year in high school.
It's very hard for me to study because even as you can see, electricity is not connected in the manyatas.
She worries that she might not be ready for her national exam when the Ministry of Education picks a date. Even though there hasn't officially been a single COVID-19 death in this county, Jacqueline's school must remain closed until the government reopens schools countrywide.
I don't think if I can pursue my career because in school I used to spend most of my time reading and consulting some hard questions from my teachers. But for now, even though they bring for me an examination paper, I think I will just perform poorly. But those who have chances of reading on TVs, I think they will perform better.
TVs are a luxury here. Internet is unheard of, a situation that has exposed a huge digital gap among the world's students. Data from half of the world's 1.8 billion learners lack access to internet, but still, Jacqueline chooses to look at things positively.
Since I'm not in school, I'm learning informally, and mainly at 4 a.m. I usually wake up to prepare for my young ones some milk and also to separate that milk from fat. I really appreciate my culture, Turkana.
But there is one thing she doesn't appreciate.
In our culture, Turkana, the girls of my age who are always just idle at home might be married off. And with me, I'm just worried because I can be married off.
Save the Children predicts that 6 months of school closures could lead to additional 13 million child marriages this decade. School is a safe haven for Jacqueline and is also a solution to her hunger.
What I miss most in school, the school food, simply because here at home, the food is always once in a day.
It is estimated that 324 million children globally are missing out on meals because of school closures. Jacqueline looks forward to the day she will return to school. Then she won't have to worry about where her next meal will come from. Sylvia Chebet, BBC News.
For more on the impact of COVID-19 on African school children, let's speak to Bohen Chakroun, the Director of Education at UNESCO. Thank you for joining us here on Focus on Africa. First off, just how much has this set back the efforts of trying to get African children, particularly those in rural areas, an education?
Thank you, and good evening to you and to everybody. Of course, there have been great impact on different ways, and I think it's important to highlight that the African students and learners have been affected more than others because of the lack of connectivity, because of the lack of preparedness of teachers in some cases. And what your interview was showing is that there is a combination of issues related to nutrition, social implication. So it's important to take all this into consideration. But I think also important to say that in most countries, there have been effort to address some of the challenges by adopting a mix of strategies, a mix of technologies from high-tech to low-tech or no-tech solutions that have been adopted.
What sort of tech? What sort of solutions? Because that sounds very interesting, because from what we saw there, that young lady just had no option.
Let me give an example. For example, in Senegal, we have listened to Kenya, but let me give an example in Senegal where the government has adopted what I will call high-tech, that's an online platform that is more serving urban learners, particularly for upper secondary students and mostly learners that are coming from wealthy family. But they have also adopted radio and TV programs that are serving much larger audience, including at lower ages, and particularly for pre-primary and primary schools. And then there are solutions that have been adopted where teachers have been distributing textbooks and material in communities and serving the most deprived and disadvantaged group. So this mix of strategies is very important, and we think that it's important that government take into consideration the needs of different target groups.
So where do you stand then with the urging by the WHO and UNICEF that African governments should open up the schools now for their children?
Well, according to our data, we have countries that are still in academic break. That's around 20 countries in Africa. There are countries that are closed due to the COVID, and that's around 14 countries, and countries that fully opened, around 12 countries, and countries that have partially opened, that's 9 countries. Of course, our sense is about open safely. And together with our colleagues at UNICEF, World Bank, WHO, we have called for reopening schools safely, and we are supporting countries to look at the best strategies in this context.
Just very quickly, we've seen that girls are particularly vulnerable during this pandemic when it comes to their schooling. Not only are they being forced into child marriages, but we're also having reports of FGM as well. Is there any work that you're doing to combat this or protect the girls?
Absolutely. We have launched a campaign to bring back to school girls. In particular, we have developed specific guidelines for member states for reopening school and gender-based and gender-sensitive approaches. And we are also looking at the data and monitoring how countries are responding to these challenges, and what statistics we have in terms of enrollment for both male and female.
Okay. Mr. Bohen Chakroun, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Now, Cameroon's main opposition leader, Maurice Kamto, says that he and his family are being prevented from leaving their home in the capital, Yaoundé, by members of the armed forces. In a statement, Mr. Kamto said that several demonstrators and party activists had been arrested following anti-government protests on Tuesday, but that the rallies would continue until the opposition's demands were met. They include an end to the Anglophone crisis and the resignation of President Paul Biya. The BBC's Kilian Gala has more from Yaoundé.
Just a couple of blocks down the road is the home of Mr. Maurice Kamto. It has been surrounded by the police. We tried to negotiate our way into the compound, but this was not possible. Mr. Kamto himself has sent a couple of photos to the BBC showing heavy police presence outside his compound. He has not been able to leave his compound since yesterday. He has been practically held under house arrest. Now, the first vice president of his party, Mr. Christopher Ndong, has told the BBC that close to 500 people were arrested during yesterday's protest that took place across the country. One person was killed in the littoral region in Douala. Mr. Kamto has vowed to continue protesting until Paul Biya, who has been in power for 38 years, leaves power. The protesters are also saying that there is need to revise the electoral code and to resolve the Anglophone problem that has so far killed more than 3,000 people in 4 years. Now, all attempts by the BBC to get through to the Interior Minister or to the police were futile, but Mr. Paul Atanganji, the Minister of Territorial Administration, has gone on record as promising help to Mr. Kamto and threatening to jail him if he persists in protests that have been described by the government as illegal. Kilian Gala, BBC News, Yaoundé.
Okay, let's return to our breaking news this hour, coming to us from the United States, where prosecutors in the state of Kentucky have announced that one of the 3 police officers involved in the killing of Breonna Taylor in her Louisville home in March will face charges of wanton endangerment is the charge. The case has been a focus of the Black Lives Matter protests across the United States. You remember that she was shot multiple times during a drug raid on her apartment. We are expecting to hear from the Kentucky Attorney General within the next hour or so. In the meantime, let's get the latest to the story from our correspondent, Larry Modoa, who's in Washington for us. So, Larry, just remind us what happened in the last half hour.
In the last half hour, Luquesa, we've heard from the grand jury in Jefferson County, which is where Louisville, Kentucky is, and they have decided to charge the former officer Brett Hankison with 3 counts of wanton endangerment in the case of Breonna Taylor. He shot into her house, the grand jury says, by showing extreme indifference to human life. So he is now going to face those charges, which are a felony. And 2 other officers who also fired that night in that raid are not being charged, even though they still work for the Louisville Metro Police Department. They have been on administrative duty. And so this is a major decision, but one which protesters in the streets in Louisville are not quite happy with. So it's expected to be a very long day and into the evening where there's a state of emergency in Louisville and there's a curfew in place.
Yeah, why was that put into place, Larry? Can you just remind us, please, because the tensions have been building. Many people had never heard of Breonna's name before George Floyd.
Absolutely. So when this case came into the fore, it was at the time of a national reckoning with policing in America, and especially how American police departments relate with the Black community. And so Breonna Taylor became a rallying call in that movement. And Louisville, I was there 2 weeks ago, has been boarded up for a while. A lot of the downtown area has not reopened. Where the protest and the memorial has been is right next to the mayor's office and the police department, the corrections office. And this is where the epicenter of all the action and activity is likely to be. People are unhappy. Even though the family reached a $12 million settlement with the city last week, they feel that unless the three officers involved are indicted, charged, and convicted, they don't think that is a sign of justice for them.
Larry, just remind us what happened with those 3 officers and Breonna and her partner. What happened that night?
So on the night of March 13, Luquesa, Breonna had just fallen asleep next to her partner, and then police officers executing what is called a no-knock warrant used a battering ram to break down the door and force their way in. Her partner, who is a licensed gun owner, fired because he didn't know who was breaking in. He actually called 911 in tears because in the ensuing fire, Breonna Taylor was shot between 8 and 10 times and died. And he called 911 as she bled to the floor she bled to death on her own floor. At the same time, these officers believed they announced themselves, even though many of the neighbors have said they didn't. And that began this long process to try and get justice, which has been investigated by the Kentucky Attorney General, and the grand jury is the final step in preparing charges. But it begins the next level, which is the long process of the trial to try and see what happens here. So It's going to be a lot of months before it's all done.
Okay, and I know you're going to be watching this story through this evening because this isn't finished yet, certainly for today, because we're expecting to hear from the Kentucky Attorney General. That is at Frankfort in Kentucky. The shooting and the town concerned was Louisville, but we're expecting to hear from Daniel Cameron, who's the Attorney General for Kentucky, following that announcement by the judge announcing that one policeman has been charged with wanton endangerment in the shooting of Breonna Taylor in March of this year. You're watching BBC World News, and this is, of course, Focus on Africa. We're going to take a look at some other stories making headlines. And there has been a sustained drop in the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases across the continent over the past month. The number of new cases has been reducing by an average of 10% per week. The Africa Centres for Disease Control said this was down to public health interventions and experience in dealing with diseases such as Ebola. So far, there have been 1.4 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Africa and just over 34,000 deaths. At least 25 people, including primary school children, have died after a petrol tanker exploded in central Nigeria. Police in the town of Lokoja in Kogi State say that the truck driver lost control in a major highway and hit several oncoming vehicles. Tanker accidents are common on Nigerian roads. In June of this year, 4 people were killed in Lagos after several explosions involving 4 vehicles. Now, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says that the EU's current system for dealing with migration no longer works. She was speaking as she published new proposals to deal with the flow of migrants and asylum seekers into the EU, an issue that's caused acrimonious divisions in the bloc. She admitted that the Moria campfire on the Greek island of Lesbos that left nearly 13,000 people homeless was indeed a wake-up call to all member states.
Moria is a stark reminder. We need to find sustainable solutions on migration, and we all have to step up. The European Commission is ready to step up as well. We want to provide rapid assistance. We will set up a joint pilot with the Greek authorities in Lesbos for the management of a reception centre. To implement this, we decided on a task force today. With the support of our EU agencies, this task force will help improve conditions for people on the island in a durable manner. Together, we have to show that Europe manages migration in a humane and effective way.
You're watching Focus on Africa. Still to come. Breaking ground and breaking barriers. We meet Zimbabwe's all-female miners. Welcome back. Now, mining is not one of those sectors you traditionally expect to find women working in. However, things are changing and the opportunities and wealth of the Earth's natural resources are increasingly becoming accessible across the genders. In Zimbabwe, a group of all-female miners based in the northern gemstone-rich district of Koroi are extracting these beautiful things. Now, this is aquamarine, same family as emeralds. Zimbabwe believe that since approximately 90% of farming across the continent is actually carried out by women, well, why not mining? Why not indeed? This is their story.
Experience yangu panapa tichitanga kushanda pamaini takaona kuti zvakakodzera, takaona kuti zvakatinakirawo kwatiri vakadzi takakwanisa kuita zvinhu zvatisingakwanisi kuita, zvatainzi vakadzi hatikwanisi kuita, taikwanisa kunzi vakadzi taingodzvinyirwa most of the times. Saka takangoona kuti izvi zvemining vakadzi nesu tinokwanisa kutozviitawo, because taingonzi mining ndevarume. Saka so far tikutoona kuti nesuwo vakadzi totokwanisa mining. Ever since ndatomboshanda pa mining, but by the time ndakaitwa manager ndakatozviona kuti I'm the one to lead the people. So I must overcome all the differences and the difficulties anenge ari pamine.
We are just owners. Every single job done in this mine is done by the women. They work hard, and we believe that through us working in partnership with them, this mine will succeed. This community will be able to develop. They want to build a community. They want to build their home. They want to look after their families, and they're the only breadwinner in the families. The main opposition was mainly because people didn't think women would be able to do this job. A lot of the people here still believe that whatever the women are doing here, men can do it better and they can do it faster.
Arina kundiomera ndikukwanisa kushanda semadzimai. Basa repano ndingati sekutaura kunoita vanhu kunze, nesu tichishanda mukati menzvimbo inoyi, sesu tajaira dzatova nyama dzajaira. Wakanga wanga wakaoma. Murume wangu wandinaye chirema akatonhora that side kubva munomu. Saka zvinhu zvakundiomera kuti pane everything zvese. Ndiri munhu wekuti ndinongoti munhu wekuti ndinozvisapota ndega. Inini ndiri kuti ndapinda pano paZimbabwe. Ndiri kuona kuti upenyu hwangu. Saka izvozvi ndapinda pano izvezvi ndinoti zvava nani nokuti handichaenda kumaricho kuye. Ndakuitira maricho angu ndiri pano. Mwana anonzwa kufara ari kwanenge ari koko.
Zakanaka, as they say. Now, this one is for the men, and in particular, men suffering hair loss. And yes, we know about hair transplants, but when it comes to black afro hair, there are some issues that mean it's not always a success. Well, there is one alternative, which is taking off, and that is the man weave. Now, weaves are popular with women. It's hair or extensions that are actually attached to your own hair. But what happens if you don't have the hair in the first place? The BBC's Dougal Shaw has the story.
These two men are worried about hair loss. So they've come to a small business in a South London industrial estate to try a technique that's proved popular in America. Sometimes known as man weaves, this involves attaching natural hair to the head using adhesives before a specially trained barber blends it in. Stefan is an influencer and model. He's known as the UK's most right-swiped man on Tinder.
I can't believe it. Look like a new man.
So if you meet someone on Tinder now, are you going to tell them you've had this done, or
no, not at all. Just tell them I've grown it out.
Okay. We're sorted.
Who are you most excited to show it to?
My missus, actually.
This business thinks it has found a gap in the market by focusing on fashion-conscious young black men who don't want to spend thousands on transplant surgery, which is also harder for Afro-Caribbean hair, but will pay for a monthly subscription service to keep their new hairstyles looking sharp.
In black culture, style has always been a thing that's really important to us, and we care about how we look, we care about how we present ourselves. So hair loss is viewed with some stigma.
However, some feel this new trend is a bit ironic, since men have created a lot of stigma around female wigs.
There's so many memes and there's so many videos that they say like, oh, women are so fake, just take them swimming on the first date and you'll see what they really look like. And now it's so ironic because these are all guys that are making these jokes. They're now wearing wigs just like us.
So what do you think your female friends would say to this?
I think a lot of females would be like, no, that's like not on.
The men I met were very pleased with their new looks, but women will have a big say too on whether this trend takes off. Dougal Shaw, BBC News.
Isn't that fantastic? OK, don't forget you can get in touch with me on social media. I'm at Lukwesa Burak. I'll be back with you tomorrow. From all of us at Focus on Africa, bye-bye.